Hello, and welcome. It's really amazing to have you guys here. My name is Daniel, I was a professional opera singer and beatboxer, and tonight we're gonna be reacting to Disturbed's The Sound of Silence, performed live on Conan. So, after I posted the first Sound of Silence from Disturbed, every comment that was asking me to react to something else was this video. So, here I am doing it. Just to hear the differences, being able to compare and contrast. It'll be interesting, and I always love listening to live performances too, so I'm just excited to jump into this, and I hope you guys are too. So without further ado, let's just do it.
Please welcome Disturbed!
Love this tone.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone.
Oh yeah, dude.
Neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stared by the flash of a neon light.
Oh, it's so tender.
It split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more.
Oh, it's so beautiful, dude.
People talking without speaking.
Yeah!
People hearing without listening. People writing songs.
Woo!
And voices never shared.
Oh, dude!
And no one dared disturb the sound of silence.
Yes!
Fools say now you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words and I might teach you.
Oh, dude!
Take my arms and I might reach you, but my words, like silent raindrops, fell, echoed in the wells of silence, and the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. The sign lashed out its warning, and the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, whispered in the sound of silence.
Oh, chills, dude. Dude, that was... I see why all of you wanted me to watch this version. The first one I saw was raw and very powerful. And this was also very raw and powerful, but you get this feeling of tenderness throughout the majority of the first half of the song. And then as it really ramps up, you just get you get that same intense rawness, but because it just is live, you feel that connection with the artist. It doesn't just feel like a spectacle like the original music video did. It feels more like a connection between the artist, the performer on stage, and the audience. Not just the live audience, but anyone watching, and just engaging with the music in a way that's profound and beautiful. The way that music is supposed to be felt, which is a connection of human beings through something that transcends yourself, your own character and your own values. It goes beyond what you've labeled as yourself and what you identify yourself as, and just goes into you are but one person within the broad scale of humanity, and your one small light is able to radiate incandescently and connect with other small lights that just blossom into this beautiful connection of humanity in and of itself. It was just ultimately what I'm getting from this piece is just the fact that this tenderness and this just inherent beauty of the way that he was singing. His vibrato at the beginning was a little shaky, and that could be for any number of reasons, but to be honest, if you are not in an operatic setting, meaning you are not on stage to perform opera, I actually find shakier vibratos, especially in live music, to be actually kind of endearing, because to me that reflects what courage is. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's recognizing that you are afraid or there is plenty of fear and you march through it anyway. It's Rengoku's line from Demon Slayer, where no matter how ashamed you might feel from your own weakness or uselessness, set your heart ablaze, grit your teeth, and keep moving forward. And being able to connect in a way that says the voice isn't not fully supported, but when your body just has an initial reaction to something and you still present it in a way that's very tender, very vulnerable, but coming from a position of strength, and making sure that you trust your practice, you trust your hours of effort, you trust your musicians, you trust everything, and whatever happens, and you just go out and you do your thing. Man, so much respect for the artist. But just in terms of the overall sound, it was just so beautiful, and you really connected with the artist, especially because there was a little bit of that shakiness. You don't see him as, oh wow, this is my biggest inspiration and he's an untouchable on the highest pedestal kind of performer. You really get the feeling that he's a human being sharing something really profound and beautiful with his audience. And I love that about artists. I love feeling that, especially in live music. So I'm just really excited to jump into this analysis and take it apart a little bit more and talk about what it is that he's doing. So let's just do that.
Please welcome Disturbed!
Conan looks so happy. I love it.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I love that right at the beginning. Having that really dark, open awe. Hello, da, instead of da. Which is very fitting since the word itself is darkness. But just to have that more dark overtone to your vowels adds a lot of atmosphere to the opening phrase, to any phrase, but especially the opening phrase where you're really trying to set a tone, set an atmosphere. So great on him for having that awareness. Oh yeah.
Is my old friend.
And the way that he holds friend, there's an N that he's holding. Typically in classical music, when you're holding on to specific notes, you would hold on to the vowel itself to go friend, and then have the ND closed off at the very end. But here he just holds the end to show that this is still a very closed, very tight feeling close to your chest, but the sound itself is not ended. The cadence is not ended. The musical phrase is not ended. It's still continuing, but you still feel that closeness and that tightness because he closed off to the consonant and then very gently released the D. Friend. And it just kind of leaves you in this limbo until you reach the next musical cadence. So, lovely stuff.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
And he's so smooth in his phrases. I've come to talk with you again. Like it just, each note is starting on a note and going to the next note. And what I mean by that is, you could simply do each word as its own note. I've come to talk with you again. But to do, I've come to talk with you again, to kind of have that dragging feeling, but still maintaining and generating that momentum to have plenty of room to build. It's very lovely, and it adds a strong atmosphere to the piece. And it's very dark and very closed, but you can tell that there's still plenty of room to grow. And that's something incredible about storytelling in and of itself, where you have to start small. You have to start with a character that's flawed or has plenty of room to grow so they can grow, so you can watch their development. And that's what this piece is. That's what every piece should be, which is you start with something that captures you, that has a lot of potential but isn't fully developed, and then you develop it. You have these rising actions, these climaxes, these falling actions and resolutions. But ultimately, throughout the piece, as long as you're constantly maintaining this potential, this tenderness, while demonstrating your growth, then you're absolutely doing a great job executing as a performer.
Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was
still keeping those darker tones, still haven't grown tremendously, but you can feel the growth happening because the vibrato is becoming a little bit more vocalized. And on top of that, just talking about his technique, it is really well supported. Even though his vibrato is, like I mentioned, a little bit shaky, that is totally fine because he's still vocalizing very well. It's not a whisper, he's not expending breath without vocalizing it. It is all fully there, fully present. It's just the way that the breath is spinning that causes the vibrato to be shaky. But again, I think that that's actually a very endearing and charming aspect about performing, especially in a song as emotionally open as this is.
planted in my brain still remains.
That's an interesting choice, to cut it off after planted, take a breath, and then go into the rest of the cadence. Mainly because when you're singing in musical phrases, you want to make sure that your breath doesn't cut off sentences. You know, it's like having a conversation with someone who stops in the middle of sentences, and there's an awkwardness to that. So when you're singing a musical phrase, you want to make sure that your breath can be maintained throughout the entirety of the phrase. So if you are cutting off in the middle of a phrase, you got to make sure that it's for a very specific reason, where either the ending few words are just really long and require a ton of breath, therefore you need to have a quick breath somewhere in the middle of that phrase to support the rest of the phrase, or you're trying to emphasize very key words and messages in the phrase to stop and give attention to the upcoming words. So let's listen to that again.
That was planted in my brain.
Yeah, even though it's not necessarily essential to cut it off there before in my brain, I see what he's going for, because the moment planted is let go, like I mentioned before, you're just kind of left in that limbo until the next cadence arrives. But it's not even until the next cadence arrives, it's until the rest of the cadence arrives. So just to have that, still that feeling of jumping off of a note, that was planted in my brain. it still creates this feeling of tenderness and closeness that really connects you to the artist. So even though I personally wouldn't have chosen to cut it off at that point, I definitely respect the fact that he chose to do that, to create that very light effect to lead into the "In My Brain Still Remains." So I respect the choice.
Still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone.
And he's not pushing too hard in his lower register. In reckless dreams. Instead of in reckless. Like, a lot of, especially in classical music, a lot of baritones and basses will really lean into their lower register because that's their more powerful register. That's the area of their voice that they really like to resonate as much as possible. So oftentimes by doing that, they might become flat, or it just becomes a little histrionic in a way where it's just over dramatized, and it does it, and it throws off the balance of the piece. So just to approach those low notes very tenderly and just arrive right in the center of the pitch each time, that was really well executed, and I love that a lot.
In restless dreams I walked alone.
His voice is so light, I love it.
Narrow streets of cobblestone.
L is a very difficult consonant to sing on because it's so guttural. All of cobble. Oh. So to try to make that as forward as possible, cobble, oh, where you're, instead of keeping it in your throat, you're trying to keep it through your mouth so it doesn't affect the sound coming through your larynx. I really appreciate that because he is putting it very forward.
Narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp, I turn my collar to the cold and damp.
Kind of gave up a little bit on the "into the cold" instead of what he executed, which was "unto cold." Like, let's listen to that again.
I turn my collar to the cold and damp.
Yeah, just, I was never really a fan of when people just kind of give up on notes. But that being said, in a live performance, not everything is going to go the way you want. That's just how it is. And that actually adds to the thrill of seeing someone perform live because there's no one to hide behind. There's no editing to hide behind. There's no redos, retakes. It's all there for the audience. And when something doesn't happen perfectly, you just move forward. You just keep doing your thing. And I think the mark of a great performer is someone who recognizes that slip up and utilizes it to the best of their ability. And in this case, something that I actually really enjoy through my first playthrough of it when I was listening to it, which was when he had that unvocalized note on the, he utilized it in a way that's saying, yeah, that was more intentional. I did that deliberately because it adds kind of this choking feeling. It adds to that tightness, that closeness. And honestly, respect.
When my eyes were stared by the flash of a neon light.
Oh, it's so flowy.
In the night and touch the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw.
Oh, his voice is so light here. Like, it doesn't have to be so egregious, so immensely powerful and forceful at this point. It's still, like, the dynamic has increased to something like a mezzo forte to a forte, or a medium loudness to a loudness. It's still tender. It's still in this very vulnerable and open space, but now you can actually feel a lot more strength coming into his voice, not just because of the dynamic, but because of the tonal shift of the piece. I love it, dude.
10,000 people, maybe more.
Oh, maybe. Instead of maybe, where it's very bright, he's still maintaining that dark atmosphere. Even in this period of growth in the piece, he's still maintaining these darker vowels, which really adds to the overall aesthetic and tone of the piece. I love it.
People talking without speaking.
Oh, yeah.
People hearing without listening.
Hearing is very, very tough because R is a very guttural consonant. Hear, So from a classical perspective, you would try to flip the R. Hearing. So you're not really lost in your throat. But to keep it as forward as possible, especially when you're not going to roll it, you are just going to sing it in the Americanized style, just to keep it very forward and not have it get lost in your throat, very similar to the L, like we were mentioning earlier. It's the same idea. So to do people talking without hearing, or whatever the line was, even though the R is still in your throat and it can only be generated through that area of your larynx, you're still putting the sound as forward as possible. And he hasn't let that escape him alongside everything else that I'm sure he's thinking and feeling in this present moment. So wonderful.
People writing songs.
Oh, so tender.
And voices never share.
Oh, his vibrato was so good there. And voices never... Yeah, just... This is such a beautiful thing to watch because when you go see a live performer, at least in my experience, whenever I see someone live, what I always hope for, 100% of the time, is to see a performer who's had countless hours of practice go on stage confidently and say, here is my heart. Here is everything that I have been cultivating, not just for myself, but to present to you. And it is a very vulnerable place to be in when you do give your heart to others, not just in terms of a live performance, but just in general in society and the day-to-day. So to have the absolute courage to be able to pass off something that you've spent a lifetime cultivating and presenting it to others in order to forge a very unique experience, a very unique connection within a moment, is something that I think contributes to real beauty in humanity, real beauty within the arts. And I absolutely love the fact that he's doing that. And when I say vulnerability, I don't mean to say that he's doing it from he's weak and meek. No, he's representing Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. You never once think that that character is meek or weak by any means. He's very powerful, very strong, and you definitely don't want to mess with him at any point throughout the series. And the same is true for this artist, where you feel this extremely palpable strength radiating off of him. So when he presents his heart, when he presents his vulnerability to you, you're just transfixed in the moment because you recognize that someone so powerful and someone that could be very intense can present something so tender, something so beautiful, and is able to connect emotionally to something so tender, especially when it's coming from someone who presents an aura of strength. So I love that. And he's just cutting off those phrases. No one dare. And he's just tapering off those notes because it is still, even though it's powerful now, there's still that tenderness, and I love it.
No one dare disturb the sun.
Ooh, that voice crack added so much. Like I mentioned earlier, things happen live, it is what it is, but if you can play into it, oh yeah, mark of a great performer.
Disturb the sound of silence. Fools say now you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words and I might teach you.
I've never heard a vocalist just fully Americanize the lyrics, like, and what I mean by that is fully lean into our guttural consonants, but still keep them so forward and contribute Not just in terms of this is the language that the song was written in, but use the language, utilize the language for a higher purpose, which is the tonal theme of the song. And that's expertly executed. English is such a difficult language to sing in. I have sung in 6 languages in my time as a performer, and honestly, I would list English as... I'd say English is the second most difficult language for me to sing in, even though it's my native language, with French being the first most challenging for me to sing in. The easiest languages for me to sing in would be Italian and German, but oh my gosh, it's just so incredible.
Take my arms that I might reach you, but my words, like silent raindrops, fell, echoed in the wells of silence, and the people bowed and prayed.
Oh my gosh, that grit, that raw coarseness in his voice when he just really sinks into that and lays it in you. It's so powerful, especially when that entire intro just didn't have that. It was so tender, even though it was louder. And now we're really getting into the grit of it. Oh, I love this. These polarizing textures in his voice. Oh, it's so good, dude. Adds so much power.
And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made.
Yeah!
The sign lashed out its warning, and the words that it was forming, and the sign said the words of the...
Oh my gosh, and the fact that he's able to go in and out between them of his very lovely natural timbre into that coarseness, into that intensity, and just play with the musical cadences themselves and just go from this tenderness and easily transition into that rugged coarseness. Oh, it's so good, dude.
And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement.
Like on walls, even though it could have ended on that powerful intensity, there was that ruggedness, but he still tapered it. He still allowed the note to fade away into that tenderness, even though it was still in that coarse area of his voice. There's so much happening in these tiny little details within the musical cadences that just evoke so much emotion, not just from the artist, but from the audience connecting with the artist. Oh, it's so beautiful, dude.
Whisper in the sun of silence.
Yeah, that reverb is incredible. Yeah, and just to completely open himself up at the very end. It's not necessary that he needs to do that, but it's so incredible because, like I've mentioned a lot on this channel before, body language is huge when you're performing. And when you have a small stage like that, where you don't have a lot of room to walk around and play around with a lot of open space, you are the main focal point with spotlights specifically targeted on one specific location. So you have to make the most of that space. So just to be able to keep your body open, especially when the entire song itself was pretty closed and open at times, but overall, you want to leave the audience with a very specific impression. And that final gesture, that final "I am open," leaves them with that final impression. And oh, it's so beautiful, dude. Yeah, really great interpretation of the piece. Really well executed, especially live in front of that live studio audience. And it was just incredible. Great, great job. I heard from the other video that he was trained as a cantor, which was really great. I remember when I was growing up, I was raised Jewish. So ultimately, what ended up happening was the cantor that I knew at my synagogue was an incredible musician, and even though he had problems later down the line with his health, he definitely helped inspire my musical journey. And so to be able to draw the connections and the parallels between oh my gosh, I didn't expect to be so emotional. But to draw the connections between the two people, both being trained as cantors and utilizing that kind of knowledge in a way that allows them to express their music in a way that's genuine and authentic for them and allows their audience to connect with them as well in such a pure way. To see that kind of human connection is always something that I find so much gratitude in being able to participate with. It's ineffable. Thank y'all so much for being here. It means a lot that you guys are here and watching this stuff with me. If you guys missed it, my live streams are on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I would love for you guys to show up and be there so we can just vibe, hang out, talk about our interests, talk about ideas and philosophies. And that's a great opportunity for you guys to ask me questions as well. I had a really great time listening to this piece, and I hope you guys did too. So I'm really excited just to keep up this musical endeavor with all of you, and I can't wait to see all of you in the next video. Have a great rest of your evening, everyone.